Hello, my quilty friends. It's Stacy of Stacy Creates Stuff, and I am here today with a new quilt tutorial. No, it's not that one. It is, however, this one. When I saw this new collection from Wyndham Fabrics called Ebb and Flow, I just knew that I had to create something spectacular that really showed off those fabrics. I didn't want a quilt that had a lot of tiny little pieces to it because you would miss out on some of these fabulous large prints. So, pencil, paper, and Adobe Illustrator, I came up with the Ribbon Weave Quilt pattern. The real key to making this pattern is organization. But basically, it's rectangles and squares. So, let's get started. For this kit, I have cut the strips as directed in the instructions. There are strips that get cut into squares, and then there are strips that get cut into rectangles. So this particular color, this is the darkest of solid fabric. It's not really solid, it's a tone on tone. It's the darkest one of that, and that one has the most squares that are being cut. The rectangular pieces, I cut strips using the widest dimension of the rectangle, and then I subcut them into the rectangles from that. I like to cut all the rectangles from one particular fabric, stack them together, and then go on to the next fabric. While these fabrics are different from each other, when you start looking at them quite a bit, sometimes you have to do a double take to make sure that you have the correct fabric. So that's why I am keeping all of the fabrics together. And I am just going to make a pile of all the different fabrics. There are 12 fabrics that are used for the large rectangles. So I'm going to just stack those all together. This is the quilt block that we're going to make. All of the blocks are constructed the same way, and there are 6 different configurations of the fabrics. But again, they're all constructed exactly the same way. And the real key to this quilt is organization. So let me show you how I'm going to get organized to put this quilt together. This is the way that I have organized the fabrics. There are 12 main prints that are used throughout the quilt. They have rectangles cut from them, and they also have squares. So I have laid them out on a large design board and then on a smaller design board. In addition to these 12 main focus fabrics, there are 5 other fabrics. The sort of modeled solids, if you will, the gold geometric, and then the pale geometric down here. So now that I have all of the blocks organized, it is time to put them together on a separate board to make that first block. Future Stacy here with a little bit of an update on organizing the fabric. After I made the quilt, I realized that it would be so much easier if I had put the fabrics in the same order that I referenced them into the pattern. Because of course I'm making the quilt and writing the pattern at the same time. So in the pattern, this sheet is included that you can then cut apart and label each of your fabrics. And so I have now laid them out on the board in numerical order based off of how I have put them in the pattern. This order is slightly different than the order you'll see throughout the rest of the video. But if you organize them this way, it'll be so much easier to be like, oh, now I need the next two, and then I'll need the next two, and they'll pair up much better. And the same would go with the smaller board that has the squares on it. So if you need to pause to look at this, you can do that. Or of course, if you have the pattern, you will have all of the little tags. In addition, I also have tags so that you can label which blocks are which, and then as you are putting them together, which row is which row. Now you'll be able to refer to the instructions for which fabrics go into which block. There are 6 blocks lettered A through F, and this is block A. Oh, obviously already completed, but I'm going to show you how I lay out so that this is easier to construct. I'll just set it aside here for a moment. I need a large rectangle of this pale teardrop, these leaves, and I will be making a total of 7 of these blocks. So I'm going to go ahead and count out 7 rectangles. This fabric is used again in another block, and that's why I'm only needing 7 for this particular block. Then I'm going to go ahead and pull the rectangle for this fabric. Again, I just need 7 of those. And I'm going to lay those in that direction. And then I'm putting the remaining rectangles back onto the master board, if you will. All right, let's go to this corner, and we're going to pull this fabric. Again, I need 7. I'm going to place those on the board that way. And then the last large rectangle is this print, the little dots. And I'm going to place that on the board. That takes care of the main large rectangles. Now, every block, A through F, has this in the center. So I'm just going to take my entire stack and place them here. Now, let's look at what's in the corners. In this corner, it's easier to tell this is green. So I'm going to just grab 7 green. Well, actually, I'm going to grab the whole stack. Every single block is going to have the same fabrics in the corners. So I am just going to place those green ones down there. In this corner and this corner, so the upper left and the lower right, is the blue. And just so you can see, there is a difference between the blue and the dark inky color. But the blue has dark parts in it. So sometimes, depending on how it's cut, you can't always tell right away. So that's why I like to keep these together in their stacks. So this has to, I'm going to split the pile, put half up in that corner and half down in that corner. Now the remaining triangles, which are made from the squares, are the 4 here in the center and then this one up in the corner. So I'm going to take my stack here, and again, this is mostly the same, and I'm going to explain that in just a moment, for all the blocks. I can obviously redistribute. I've just kind of made some piles. All right, here are all the components. Now, there is a little bit of a twist, and that is, you have to look in the instructions to see how many special blocks of block A you make. And I believe there is 1. And the special block, instead of using the mottled dark inky color, it uses the gold geometric. So I've already made that block for block A, but if I hadn't, I would have taken 1 of each of these and placed it on the top so that I can make that block first. Now, there are still some more squares that we have to fill in on our board here. And these are the blocks that help continue that rectangle into the piece adjacent to it. So I'm going to show you how we lay those out. And again, I am just taking the number that I need, which would be 7. I'm going to place those up there. They're the extension going that way. Likewise, this is going to extend into there. So I will take those 7. This is going to extend into here. So I will take these 7. And the last one is for this section, which is an extension of those lovely leaves, little teardrop leaves. So I am placing those here. And you can see now that I have all of the pieces. So if we look at just one section, fold that back a little bit, you can see that it is a rectangle with 3 triangles. So to make my life even easier, I'm going to go ahead and pull just those fabrics that I need for that one corner. I'll make that corner, I'll place it back on the board, I'll make the next corner, and so forth. So I'm going to pull, I don't need all of those, I'll just grab a stack. And I like to start by sewing the square in the corner. And I'm just going to place, and again, because I've laid this out exactly how it is here in the master A block, I am going to take my square, place it in the lower right-hand corner, draw a diagonal line from corner to corner of this square. I'm going to sew just inside of that line because this will fold back like that. I'm then going to go and do this opposite corner. The same thing. I'm going to align it with the 2 edges, the top and the side, draw my diagonal, sew just inside the diagonal so that I can flip that back. And then the last square that I will do that to is this one. And this fabric, it doesn't really matter direction, so I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to, again, draw on the diagonal, sew just inside that diagonal, and that will fold back as well. I will then trim off all of the excess fabric, leaving a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, this grip board really makes it much easier to draw on your pieces because it holds them in place. You can see how easy that was as compared to trying to draw here and see my fabric is shifting under my ruler. This really keeps it from shifting and I get a nice accurate line. And remember, you only need to mark 7 of these for this particular block, even though I have stacks higher than that of the modeled fabric. I could go ahead and mark all of them, but I am using an air erasable pen, and it may disappear before I get to the next section of blocks. We'll see. All right, with those all marked, let's get to the sewing machine. I'm aligning my square with the lower right corner of the rectangle, and then I am going to sew just inside of this line, so a little bit over into this area as opposed to right on the line. At least that's the goal. While this fabric is directional, it can go either upwards or downwards. The leaves go in both directions. We'll talk more about the directionality of this fabric in a little bit. Now I'm only sewing 5 because I have already sewn 2 of these blocks together, but of course you would be sewing 7. My new gadget. All right, so this would fold back and I would press that into place. Now that I have those pressed, I have put them back on the board in the direction that they were. These are those same color. These are just the extra that I'll need for the next set of blocks. And I'm ready to, I'm just going to sew into the opposite corner. So I will take, this is the lighter blue, lighter compared to the inky color, and line that with the top and sides of the rectangle, and it goes opposite of the inky color, and I am sewing on the diagonal this way. Same process, I'm going to sew just to the inside, so more on this side of the line. Again, I've placed those back in this onto my design board in the position that they need to be. And now I know now that this fabric goes into this corner and it will overlap this triangle just a little bit. And that is exactly what it's supposed to do. Just like the others, I am aligning the top and the side, and I'm going to sew just inside of my drawn line. Here I am with the finished section, first section of block A. So I'm going to transfer that back onto the master board with block A on it. Set that right in there. I'm going to go ahead and take off the royal blue squares, and I'll take off these navy squares for the moment. Now I'm going to concentrate on this quadrant. So I'm going to pull off these. I need my pieces that go there. These are going to go in this corner, and this goes in that corner. Now these happen to be the same fabric. They're both that inky dark fabric, so that is fine. And of course I only need to mark 7 of them for this block. I already have these 7 pulled. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to draw the lines on the diagonals for 7 of this, 7 of these, and 7 of these. And so, see if I just turn it. Well, if I turn it this way, it mirrors this perfectly. So it's going to be sewn together the same way. I always do the same thing though, just in my mind to keep it a little bit more organized, is I sew what is essentially the star point that forms around the center. It is the square that has nothing next to it on the short side. I sew that one first. I then sew the opposite, whether that is this dark inky color, or sometimes it's the royal blue, sometimes it'll be green or royal blue again. And then the last square that I sew on is the main fabric for the next section of the block. So I'm going to go ahead and do this section. I will come back and repeat that for these other two. And when I have all of the different rectangles sewn together, I'm going to show you how we put that together with this square, because it does work, and I promise it's not terribly difficult to put together. All right, and here I am with that next section, and I'm going to place that right here. I'm just going to take out the extra squares that are for that part of the star, and I'll set those aside over on this board so I don't clutter things up too much. And I will keep those that are in the corner. All right, next up is this block. So I'll put that on there. That goes there. These go there. I really only need 7, so I'll just grab a few of those. And same with this. There's no need to take over so many. And I'll just set these extra ones from the star point off to the side for now. I'll replenish my board when I move on to block B. And here I am with that third portion. And this one goes in this direction. You can tell because I want these fabrics to match just as these do and these do. And now we're down to this last section. So I'm going to empty off any extra pieces that I have here. And just be mindful of which is the inkier one and which is the blue. Because I will tell you that as I was sewing these, this one threw me. I saw this, and you can see that that section of it is quite dark. And for a moment, I thought I had sewn something incorrectly, but it is not, because you can tell that it is lighter than this one. So it is important to keep organized with this project. All right, so I'm placing that there, and this is the last section. So I will put my rectangle on. That goes up there. Put some of those down. I don't need all of these. Let's just grab a few. And here we have the leaves. Now, as I mentioned before, the leaves are directional. If they can go this way or this way is fine. But if they go this way, you might not want that to happen. So imagine, if you will, that being the triangle that goes on that. So obviously these leaves are now going horizontal as opposed to the vertical. So I want to make sure that when I am sewing on this direction, which means that they're going to be horizontal. The horizontalness will be parallel to the longer line. How is that? Basically, the leaves should be going this way along the longer line of the rectangle. So I will be mindful of that, because I would like to keep, now it's hard to get into position. There we go. I would like to keep this looking directional. This is the only fabric type, so we have it in this colorway, and then also in the colorway with the green background. Other than that, I don't think personally that it makes any difference which way any of the other squares go. So just be mindful of that. I'm going to organize all these, and I'm going to turn them so they're now horizontal along that longer edge of the rectangle. Let's sew these. And here we have the last piece. So again, I'm just going to put the extras away and set this in place. And you can see I was careful to make sure that the direction of these leaves continues onward. So now the big question is, how do you sew these rectangles together and that square? I promise it's not as hard as it might seem. And there is a little trick to it, not difficult. More of a mindset than anything else. And that is we need to take one of these squares, move the others out of the way for a moment, and you can see this is where it's going to go. And indeed, these sort of spiral around that square. I'm going to line that up. It does not reach to the end of the triangle, so that is fine. And I am going to sew just halfway. So let me grab my pen so you can see. I'm going to start about halfway and sew right down to the end. Let me go do that. And when I come back, I'll show you how the rest of it goes together. All right, so you can see that still maintaining my 1/4 of an inch, but I've started about halfway down the square and I have sewn that. I'm going to move that and just give it a little finger press. Place that back there so you can see. This is not attached. The top part of that square is not attached. It will be, just not right this moment. So now I have this edge right here, which will match up with this long edge. So I'm going to go ahead, flip that over, and I'm going to sew all along this edge. Be right back. Here we are with this next piece. So I sewed along the entire seam. I'm going to, again, I can finger press that open. I could go ahead and fully press this with a hot iron. This forms a single seam. That was pretty close there. These do not match up, so that is perfectly fine. But now I have this long edge, which matches with this piece. So again, I'm going to go and I'm going to sew all along here. And you can double check if you're a real stickler for making sure that these align, then 1/4 of an inch in, if you peel that back, they should match up. Let me go sew these. All right, here we are with the three pieces in place. And remember, this was the part that we only sewed halfway, which is perfect because now we have this. If I pull out that top bit of that square, this seam or this edge is as long as that edge, and I'm going to sew these two pieces together. And this is why you wanted to make sure you only started about halfway on the square, because you want enough room to be able to get this piece nicely out of the way so that you can sew this long seam. All right, we just have to finish one seam. So essentially we have started that seam and now we just need to finish it up. This was that little half section there, the only part that I finger pressed. All of the rest, once I sewed the next piece into place, I went ahead and I pressed towards the piece that I just sewed on. So everything is going away from this center square. So all I have to do here is line up the rest of these pieces and continue my seam along there. I did start this seam by back stitching just so that it had a little bit of stability, and I will start that seam, this new seam, up in the currently sewn seam and then follow all the way down. And there we have it, a finished block. I'm going to go ahead and continue making the rest of block A before I lay out block B. And remember, for block A, there are a total of 6 that have the dark inky centers and 1 that uses the dark geometric with the gold. All right, I have sewn all of block A, bring in my original 2. And again, there are 6 that have the dark inky star center and 1 that uses the geometric with the gold. So I'm going to set these blocks aside, and we're going to go ahead and prepare for block B. So all of the blocks have, of course, this center and those corners, the outer corners of each little section are all the same as well. So I'm going to start there. Block B is going to use two of the same fabrics that we used in block A. They are, however, going to be in different positions. Slide this over just a little bit. I'm going to bring over block A so you can see, because this is going to continue, which means that the next 7 pieces of this fabric are going to go here. We have a new fabric that goes in this corner. It's actually the same print, but in a different colorway. It's in with the darker background. This print to me and this print, which we used in block A and are about to use again, are very similar. And this is what I look for. Leaves. So I know it's this print, and also it's a green background versus a very dark background and these little crisscrosses that are in some of the elements. And there's a lot more circular motifs, kind of blobs of things. So this fabric is now going in this position because it's going to continue this line, just as this continues here. This is continuing this way. And we have a new fabric that goes here. And that is the blue waves. Again, the center is always the same. The green at this corner, the blues in these opposite corners, and then the dark inky blue is up at that corner. And then, of course, we have our inky squares that go in the center here to make the star points. So I'm just going to go ahead and pile some of these on. And just like its predecessor, one of the blocks will be using the gold. So I'm going to go ahead and place one set of those. I'll sew that one first, so I know that that is out of the way. This is block B. Now we're ready to lay out block C. Waves go up in the corner. The blobs with the inky background go down here. Leaves go up in this corner. And the blue dots go down here. This is block C. Of course, we get to add in these pieces. And I forgot to show you adding in block B, but you would do the same for that. You just match up the coordinating fabrics for those squares. And remember that they will go into the section that is next to it. And there we go. And remember, just like the other leaves, I would want to make sure that these are positioned so that the leaves are going in the same direction as the long horizontal. You may be wanting to make the wavy fabrics also go in the same direction, in which case, again, you would just make the waves follow along the longer bit of the rectangle. And that way, when that is folded back, it will continue that way. Block C does not use the gold. There's no gold in this one. So we'll just make all 7 blocks with this fabric. So we have the dots on the blue background, and we have our leaves. Our two new fabrics, dots on the green background, and the geometric with the teal and blue background. Same thing, we'll bring in our inky dark squares for the points. Block D just has one set of gold geometrics. And of course, have no fear, there is a diagram in the instructions. Block E has two squares that use the gold geometrics, so I am making sure that I put two of each of those squares down to make those blocks. Block E. And our last block is block F. And block F circles back around to the two fabrics that we started in block A. They are now over in this position. And there we have block F, which also just has one block that uses the gold geometric. And now that you have finished sewing each of the 6 different blocks, it is time to put them together in rows. So it follows alphabetically. Block B comes after block A, and then behind B will be C, and so forth. However, only 2 rows start with block A, so you'll have to refer to the diagram that is in the instructions to see what blocks start where. And you also need to be aware of which blocks within the quilt are the special blocks. Those would be the ones with the gold in the center for the star. In the instructions, I did include that lovely sheet that has tags where you can mark which row is which as you are putting them together. And there are a few things you need to be aware of as you are putting them together, and that is to make sure that after you sew a block onto a row, that you double check it's in the right orientation and it's the correct block. Take note of this. Always double check that these fabrics match. They do not, so I am ripping this one out. Also, this fabric and this fabric's a match. So this block is just turned upside down. And you can always tell the bottom of the row because there should be a green triangle here. Green triangles only at the bottom. That green triangle's at the top. Should have been my clue. And of course, once you have sewn all the rows together, your quilt top is done and it is time to quilt it. If you enjoyed today's tutorial, I hope you will subscribe to my channel. And if you'd like to join my email list, the link is in the description below. There are kits available for the Ribbon Weave project, and they are available exclusively from Vintage Pink and Green, my local quilt shop. Link to that is in the description below. And if you are ever on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, I really hope that you will stop in and check out the shop. It is gorgeous, and there is so many fun and wonderful things that you will find there. And that is Ribbon Weave. I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial and that you will join me again for another tutorial. If you're looking for your next tutorial, check out this one.